This is the new 11-inch and 12.9-inch iPad Pro.
What's going on, my YouTube family? It's Brian Olsen back with another video. Thank you so much for tuning in today. So we're talking the iPad Pro. In the last couple of days, maybe a week or so, Apple has had their first event of the year, the April event. And most notably, the two things that caught my eye was the iMac as well as the iPad Pro 2021. Both of these new devices have the M1 chip. What is very unique about the new iPad Pro as well as the iMac, obviously Apple is going through that 2-year transition of switching over all of their devices onto the M1. I personally didn't expect the iPad to have the M1, even though the rumor mill did mention in the information that came out over the last couple of months. The speculation was that the iPad was going to get the M1. So what makes the whole entire transition that Apple's going through, especially with the Macs and now the iPad, so unique is the intention. Not only are the designs obviously a lot thinner, a lot more compact, but the amount of power that's now available in the M1 powered iPad. It lifts all of the constraints previously experienced with the iPad. So the iPad has always been a powerhouse of a device, and I think it was always limited by like the iOS. Even though it had like every single generation iPad that came out had the power and capabilities to be able to do awesome processing within the device. I just think that the operating system, the ecosystem, was a bit of a limitation, and I'm speaking from a perspective of the Mac users and desktop applications like Pro Tools and Final Cut Pro and Logic and Adobe Premiere. Those applications were primarily for desktop applications and like the Mac OS operating system. The app developers never made that transition over to the iPad, and I think they were just waiting for this opportunity. So we saw the app developers were part of the presentation. More specifically, Luma Fusion they were kind of leading that because they have been on the mobile platform for quite some time on iPad and the iPhone. Luma Fusion as well as Filmic Pro has embraced the new architecture, and they added a few new features to their interface as well to take full advantage of the M1. But where I think is something that's going to come in future, especially with the worldwide developers conference that Apple's going to have later on this year, is that they'll probably announce significant updates to the iPadOS. And what is exciting about that is that there's a potential for desktop-based applications to cross over to the iPad. So even though you do have Luma Fusion as an option, but I think for those that are either Premiere users or Final Cut users, or even for the audio guys, Pro Tools and Logic and those applications, using like Luma Fusion is probably not an option for you. You would probably want to stay within your, the applications that you use. Like I use Premiere, so I would love to see Premiere on there. The Apple event had Adobe there, so they were showcasing their two applications that is compatible now at this point in time, which is Lightroom, not the classic, and the other one is Photoshop. But for me as a videographer, and that's why this thing was such an appeal to me, because if you look at the two iPads, the 11-inch and the 12.9-inch, what's promising about those devices, especially if you spec it up with the 16 gig 1 and 2 terabyte options, you actually have a workstation beast. You can use it with the Magic Keyboard, and then obviously there's the whole touch interface. And I think that's the other transition, because all of these other things like the Thunderbolt for display as well as the keyboard, these are all peripherals, and I think the next update is to how they're going to use the interface, the touch interface in the iPad, how they're going to actually use those to the advantage of users that want to have something like the Adobe Premiere and Logic Pro. I know that the M1, not everybody is on that architecture yet, so there's obviously an issue of compatibility. So for now, I think it's probably best to wait a little bit longer, especially with the Worldwide Developers Conference coming up. What people should do is just wait and see what happens there in terms of the operating system, and if your favorite app is going to join that ecosystem within the iPad. But I can really tell you, because of the M1 chip and because the Air has been dropped, because the Mini has been dropped, and now with the iMac, a lot of the app developers are already shifting towards the M1. Hence why we saw all of those developers there. We saw DaVinci Resolve there as well, so they definitely want to get in on the action. I think as a competitor to Luma Fusion, that will be definitely a game changer. And with the Thunderbolt speeds and the USB 4 compatibility speeds, you are going to have massive data transfers that's going to be completely game changing. And with the ability to plug it into a monitor and dock it, I think we have ourselves intent from Apple. I don't think there's anything out there like the iPad. Yes, the Microsoft Surface does have Windows on it, and yes, it is compatible when it comes to using desktop type applications, but in terms of functionality, that's always a big question. So besides the fact that the iPad is kind of appealing to a large market in terms of what it's offering for business, for travel, for creativity and photographers, I just want to focus on the niche or the market that I'm in, which is obviously creativity. So the two things that I'm involved in, obviously videography, a little bit of photography, and obviously sound design, and doing voiceovers and production from that standpoint. Now, outside of my iPhone and the MacBook, I never actually really thought of getting myself an iPad. The prospects of the M1 architecture with the 8 and 16 gig options, I wouldn't go as high as 2 terabytes, to be honest with you. I think a terabyte for me SSD is enough, especially if you invest in a really good external SSD that you can carry with you. That's probably going to be a lot cheaper if you buy yourself a fairly spec'd out but budget option iPad. I wouldn't go for the full capacity iPad, which is, I think if you spec it out in the States, it costs $2,500, which is completely nuts. The iPad is definitely an appeal for me as a videographer and an aspiring filmmaker. So I'm gonna kind of stay put a little bit because I just wanted to see how far it's actually going. Personally, I like the iMac. I am hoping to see that the 27-inch maybe would be something to write home about. I think the 24-inch is promising, and I think you can use it in a production capacity, maybe at home. I wouldn't consider this to be a pro iMac and for more serious production entities, but I do believe that it's with intent that Apple has gone this extent to release these devices to show what they are capable of. I think now the chains are completely lifted off, and we'll probably see a whole lot more development coming from Apple as far as the new M1 chips are concerned. Okay, so tell me what you think about the new devices, the iMac as well as the iPad. I want to also hear what you think about the iMac. I know I focused a lot on the iPad because it's been a point of discussion. Is the iPad something you want to get for yourself? Do you think it's worth getting? Do you think you're going to wait a little bit? Or are you intending to fully transition over to an iPad workstation? Especially if you're traveling. And once the world and everything opens up, you'll probably see a lot of people travel a lot more. So I think that maybe the iPad would appeal to that market as well. I really want to hear what you think. Drop a comment. Also hit the like button if you appreciated this video, and until next time, hopefully we can talk a little bit more about the iPad. I'm I'm obviously going to keep my ear to the ground and see what actually comes up. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. We're really long. Thank you for watching and hope you have a fantastic day. Cheers.